came from ADAC. And if you want to know about any of the resources, we have a resource guide in the back of the room. I want to thank our sponsors for today. Our showroom sponsor is Fabricut. Don't forget that we are going to go upstairs to Suite 307 after this presentation with all of our panelists for a reception in Fabricut. I want to thank our media partner, VERANDA. Of course, they are our national media partner for every Design ADAC Spring Market, so we are forever grateful to them. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ellen McGauley, who is the executive editor.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I see some same faces from this morning. It's so nice that you returned. And to anyone who wasn't, it's so good to see you. I'm Ellen McGauley with VERANDA, and I couldn't be prouder to be up here with this group. Before I get to those introductions, I just want to say right back at you, Katie. Thank you very much. You all are like family to us, and we're so happy to be here in the spring, Atlanta in the spring. There's nothing like it. There's an incredible sense of community here, and I see that in all of you and all the conversations that are going on. We always go back to our offices, and we have all these notes from the conversations that we've had here at ADAC, and so it helps kind of push us and propel us through. Really just to the fall when we're back here as well. So anyway, thank you, Katie. Thank you to the entire ADAC team. And I want to extend a special thanks to Fabricut for being a wonderful partner, a longtime partner, and I've even had the privilege to go out and see you all on a number of occasions. So I just want to thank you for this, and we're excited to go to the showroom after this. So, and finally, VERANDA has just launched a very exciting new newsletter called Trade Secrets. You might have seen some signage about this. This is a newsletter written by our editor-in-chief, Steele Marcoux. We are many but mighty, so these are our words. This is so when we're telling you how to pitch a project, that we wrote it ourselves, and it'll be coming out, I believe, once a month. And if you sign up for it, it's veranda.com/trade secrets. You will get a document that we worked hard on that was how to send the perfect pitch for when you want to pitch a project. And it tells you, basically, it just tells you everything we know. I would just put it all out there, and hopefully it's very helpful. But I think that'll be an exciting new addition. So I encourage you all to sign up. So that's what's going on with VERANDA. But now I'm going to keep these introductions brief so we can get to as much as possible. We have such an exciting panel today. We're going to start with Denise, who's here in the middle here. Denise McGaha, a Dallas, Texas-based interior designer. You have 3 collections that kind of reflect your colorful, confident point of view. You have a fabric collection with Vervain. And we can see some of that in Fabricut, right?
Yes. Yes,
So we can kind of see that.
Right at the front
3D,
door.
yes. Furniture with wildwood, and fireplaces and other architectural fixtures for material, correct? So those are your 3 licensing collections.
Yes.
So we're going to get more into those. Welcome. Thank you for being here, Denise. Ray Booth, who's no stranger to ADAC. Interior designer, architect, and partner at McAlpin. Someone we all welcome back here. He's an Alabama native with offices in Nashville and New York. And his furniture collections are for hickory chair and lighting for visual comfort. And they all, I think, reflect, we talked about this a little bit, this sort of like architectural DNA that you have that kind of is a foundation for it all. So exciting to delve into that. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Longtime friend of the magazine. And Noz Nozawa, an interior designer based in San Francisco. Red eye last night, just rolling right in.
The commitment is strong.
Yeah. And speaking of timing and just rolling right into things, you're just coming in from High Point, where you launched your first collection.
I am the baby on the panel. Thank you for allowing me my baby thoughts today.
I have a lot of questions for you, and none of them are baby questions. So, Corbett Hudson Valley Lighting Group, correct?
Yes.
How did you still standing? First of all,
Still standing, overwhelmed,
Launch.
Very grateful. The launch was amazing. I don't know how y'all do it with like multiple lines. It's really astounding, but yeah.
We'll get into all of that. Welcome, Noz.
you.
I'm so glad that you're here. It seems to me, in any of my conversations that I've had about licensing collections and the ins and outs of them, is it kind of starts 2 ways. It's either a brand approaching the designer, right, for a creative collaboration, or something that a designer like many of you are looking for in the market that you can't find. And so you think, well, I can do this, and I actually have this distinct point of view to bring it. So I kind of wanted to talk about how each of yours came about. And Denise, let's start with you. I want to talk about your fireplaces. I thought this was such an interesting story. These are your fireplaces for material. Tell us a little bit about how you started that line.
It was over 8 years ago. Our firm was hired to design 6 multi-million-dollar spec homes in Highland Park in Texas. And my goal was to make them all look very different. And so part of that was designing custom product, and we designed custom limestone and marble mantles for each of the properties. And that was that, and they sold, and the market was great during that time. And then we started getting phone calls from realtors who had shown it but not been able to sell it to a homeowner, and said, we saw this beautiful fireplace mantle, and I have a client that really wanted that home. They lost out. Where did you get the mantle? They still really want that. And then I got another call, and then I got another call. And I did 3 or 4 of them where I sold them in the beginning, and that became far too intense for me. We are also many but mighty, and it was too much for my team. So I approached Material and said, have you ever licensed anything? Because I don't want to manage the back office part of this. And we have all the designs, and we know what materials we want to use them in. And that's how it started. It was almost by accident. And we started slow. We learned things, they learned things. They'd never done it before. And now here we are with many more designs in the collection. We've done sinks, we have mosaic tiles with them that are very sustainable. They're scraps from some of the other materials that they use to develop product for themselves, and that was really important to me as well. Yeah. So that's really how that collection started, truly by accident.
I think that's so interesting, and you can see some of these coming up. Some of the mantles, they're in the slideshow. And then, when you started with Vervain, you specifically went to brands that you trusted, and you had kind of a color story to say, right? Is that color and pattern?
In a way, I then was all of a sudden a product designer, which is never what I set out to do. It just kind of happened, and so. I would do talks on how I got there. I did a collection for a lighting company for a while by the name of Curry & Company, and then I started speaking on panels, and then I started being approached. And then the pandemic happened. And so I had been thinking about other categories and brands that I wanted to partner with, and I developed a rug line first, which does not have a home. I'm doing it private label again, just like I always did before I was a product designer. And then I developed fabric off of that. It was based on the ranch that we bought, and the rugs were as well, and kind of nature and organic themes with a color story as well, to your point. So a little bit different thinking in how you would approach a floral or, an organic leaf pattern, just really unique. So.
Right.
And then we shopped that. Then we went to the brand.
Yeah, and we're going to get into, too, I thought this was really interesting, something that I learned from each of you about how you're deciding who you're approaching, if you are approaching, if that's how it's happening, and what makes a successful partnership there. And we'll get into that in a bit as well, but I thought that was really interesting.
They were both very, very different in how they originated.
Now, Ray, your furniture and lighting was sort of a growth of your brand, right? In your book, and you were tell us a little bit about how that worked.
Well, so it was really interesting. So, we all have these champions in our lives, fortunately, people who come into your life, they offer you, perspective and encouragement about what you're doing. And I had a couple of people like that. One is Jill Cohen, who Lizzie knows all too well. And I had done a book, or had started a book under being a partner at McAlpin, which there's this extraordinary history of talent and beautiful projects. And Jill was exposed to a lot of our photography and things for different jobs. And so she had the charge from Rizzoli to come up with who's the next author, who's the next person that you want to put forward. And so she was like, Ray, it's going to be you. And I was one of these people. I've always existed under this extraordinary umbrella of McAlpin, and I was like, I don't have enough stuff to do a book, And she's like, oh no, you do, and Jill knows. So we set off on it. We did the book, which was extraordinary. I think maybe that book was 2017, 2018. And Jill had said, well, now your book is the centerpiece of your brand. And much in the same way as I don't have enough to do a book, I was like, well, I don't have a brand. And she's like, oh no, well, yes, you do. So again, these champions that kind of hold you up and encourage you. And so she put me in touch with my product licensing partner, a woman named Lori Salmore, who is like the super trooper in product and is dedicated and dear and as amazing as I could ever hope for. But I had, my degree has been in architecture, but primarily my work has been interiors. Not as much now. I'm evolving into more architecture now, which the next book is going to be about. But
I'm putting a pin in that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I would exercise my architectural muscle by designing custom furniture. It was like the way I'm not just going to decorate, I'm going to create something. And yes, oftentimes it is, I don't see this in the marketplace. What do we need that's very specific for a job? So I had composed all of these custom pieces of furniture, and it was the perfect segue. Lori's like, okay, well, let's look at your photography. And, I could point out these things that I had done custom. And so that became the first brand book that we put together. And it was a little bit of lighting. It was a lot more furniture and imagery. And we started shopping it and literally took it out to the first 2 places that we took it. They accepted it, and we started a license with those. And that was Hickory Chair at the time. And then I previously, this didn't, well, it went very well, but I started with Arteriors, who is competition for visual comfort, and have evolved into visual comfort there.
Also, props to all of you. We're like adding chairs at this point. Everyone this is a really well-attended event. So.
There's room up here.
Yeah, there's room. There's another chair up here. We're going to ask you some questions, though, if you do come up. So, Noz, one thing I thought was, because you're all so different in the way that it started, and I think that's so interesting about how it kind of started for each of you. And then, Noz, what you were originally approached, and you pressed pause.
Yes.
It wasn't quite right. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was actually approached by Hudson Valley Lighting Group. Sarah Speck had just joined the company as the person to lead a lot of the licensure across all of their brands in their portfolio. And she reached out with an opportunity with Mitzi during the pandemic, which was shocking to me because I went from basically no one having any idea who I was, and I had almost like no friends, no contacts in the industry before the pandemic. And then I got put on House Beautiful, a Hearst Magazine's family brand. We love Hearst in my household. The Next Wave list for 2020. And I knew that was happening in Q4 of 2019. And I was so excited. I was like, 2020 is going to be my year. This is going to be my big debut, everybody. Get ready. And that was not the case. I learned how to make a cocktail that year. That's what I did. I figured out.
Good skill.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It got me through a lot. And so at some point in all of this wildness, the vaccine continued to not exist. I was approached and I was like, well, that's funny. Who even knows who I am? Like, I have nothing to say. With lighting, I had never humbly even thought anyone would ever even be interested in having me communicate my ideas through product as a medium. So I did my best and I scrambled to put a whole PDF together of ideas and concepts that I felt might have an opportunity to exist, but it didn't really feel like there was a soul to why I was doing it. I was like, I think I'm just doing this because I desperately now want a lighting collection because someone told me that I might be considered to have one. And so between that and the contract and not being ready with an IP attorney and all of this stuff, I basically came back to them and was like, I just don't think I have anything good to say. Can we actually maybe if you would consider reaching back out in the future at some point. That would be so nice, but I just don't think I'm ready. And so they came back a couple years later. And this time it was with Corbett, which is a higher end line within the Hudson Valley Lighting Group portfolio of brands, which meant that the ideas that I could have had more budget per unit, which was really great. And between that and having sort of realized that I had an idea that I was sort of like screaming to get out of me, it felt like all the stars were starting to align at that point.
Yeah.
So those couple of years really meant a lot for me
Yeah.
to be able to wrap my head around the opportunity.
I mean, it kind of blew me away. You're just like, I just don't think, I need to wait to have more to say. And also, maybe like the quality of the materials, you are kind of thinking, let's make it really reflect what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, I
Your
think
core values.
To your point, and I think everyone on the stage, right, like the brand fit, like the manufacturer brand fit with who we are as designers and what we want to bring forth is so vital, because it not only is a matter of what is the price point, you know, it's not just an ego thing of like, oh, is my high end or low end, or, you know, like it's not even that. It's really, does this brand and what they're after and what they want to say with their product have an alignment with what I want to do? And Mitzi, I love Mitzi. That's how I knew about Hudson Valley Lighting Group, was it's the more trend driven, more seasonal line, which is fantastic. But it also meant that I had to think about things in a more sort of short term time frame. And I was like, I don't think that's how I want to do product. Like I want to do stuff that like is never going to be trendy. Like it's not, you know, it doesn't like make sense to anyone, and therefore it makes sense sometimes to certain projects. So
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. I thought that was so interesting. And you touch on the creative, I kind of want to get into the creative side of things. Because Ray, one thing that you talked about was creative, like the idea of creative purity. And maybe those are my words, but just needing to get some, what I heard was needing to get something out on paper. And that's where it came from, and letting market sort of like,
You know, I think certainly everybody in this room is creative, but I think, you know, society, we are creative beings. We think about how to solve problems and ways and vehicles to do that. And I've been very fortunate in my career to always be able to draw and to love to draw and to use that to really exercise my creative inclinations. And so a lot of my work is, and I travel a lot. I live between New York and Nashville, and we have the good fortune of projects wherever any good client will hire us. And so I have a lot of time on planes. And so I travel with just, you know, a vellum 8.5 by 11 sketch pad. And I do, you know, I take a lot of photographs and a lot of ideas of things that inspire me. And I kind of peruse those as I'm starting to draw and try and create. And then I start, you know, layers after layers of this vellum. I mean, I'll draw something, and because I'm a little OCD, you know, it's like, oh, that's not exactly right. So I rip it out and I put it down the next sheet, and it just becomes this, you know, one sheet after the other until something of merit feels like it's born out of that process.
yeah. It's like another way of what Noz was saying about it. You have something to say, and in that moment you have to kind of get that out, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then the market. I mean, like it's, do you just kind of hand that over and say, are you interested in this?
You know, it has evolved to be that. So
Yeah.
initially with any of these collections, I had the specific task of putting together that original presentation. So it was driven, you know, I need to have this number of pieces in these different categories. But with these longer relationships that I'm now starting to experience with my product license vendors, you know, they're ready for new things, and they'll start saying, okay, well, maybe we're not going to do a whole big collection. Maybe we're going to do 5 new pieces this market. So Hickory Chair, we premiered 5 new pieces fall market. And then Visual Comfort is, they want it all the time. They're like, if you've got a one-off, if you've got 2, if you've got 5, send them our way. And so that is one of these businesses that is building for me. And, you know, when I started this, everybody said, you know, you're not going to make any money out of product, and you're not going to make your big salary out of product. But with with the right partners in this work, you can start really building a significant business that makes a big difference to your bottom line. And when you have a year like I had last year, you need that little extra kick. A slow year.
One of those years.
It was, right?
Yeah.
Oof. Yeah.
Oh,
maybe
it was a normal year. Is that?
Yeah.
Noz, when you looked at what exists in the market versus what you could bring, what was that intersection?
For me, it was giant size jewelry. So we all hear, right, lighting is the jewelry of the room. It's the thing that shines and it sparkles. And I loved that. And then I was looking around and I was like, I don't know that anybody actually like looks at jewelry when they say that, because it doesn't look like jewelry. And so for me, I started getting these ideas because like they had polluted my mind, Hudson Valley Lighting Group in 2020 with the idea that perhaps I should design lighting. So over the course of the pandemic, where I learned to make cocktails, I was making money, right? We were all doing great during the pandemic.
Making
hopefully.
money and making cocktails.
Making money
Doesn't
and
sound
cocktails.
so bad so far.
And it turns out cocktails are very affordable when you do it yourself. The ingredients just don't cost that much. Shocking. Meanwhile, I'm like, oh, Miami has the audacity to charge $40 for a martini at a hotel. I was like, I'm never coming back to this place. So I'm going to come back. It'll be fine. But I spent most of that time sort of pouring into my jewelry obsession. That was truly the place where all of my funds went, which turned out to have been a reasonably good investment, actually, not only because gold is now like triple the price that it was 4 years ago, but also it became this thing where I had an opportunity for my eye to rest. I was doing home-sized things and furniture-sized things all day long. And I realized that just looking at tiny stuff made me so happy. Like it was this way for my eyes to still be creative and visual and get excited about stuff, but I was looking at things at the size of rings and earrings and pendants and chains, and that became so fun and such a great, rewarding place for my ideas to go and my time to go when I was in hobby space. And so as 2022 approached, what I realized was I just wish that my rings and my necklaces could just be lights. You know, that felt like something that could be fun and joyful for other people. Like I felt like perhaps there would be an audience for this of other people who similarly like jewelry or similarly felt like there was an opportunity for a little more whimsy in lights that otherwise are, you know, largely gold and natural stone.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And as you're talking, I'm looking at your jewelry.
Oh, I know.
It's all making
Blinging out over here. Honestly, though, Denise is killing it. I'm like, I need more bracelets.
Yes. Denise, if we talk specifically about your fabrics with Vervain, you had, you know, as you talk about color and pattern and what you're bringing to that space, where was that intersection for you between what you wanted to bring and what was already out there and what maybe was needed, and how did that kind of come about?
I really, you know, my fabric collection is such an extension of what happened to our family or with our family during the pandemic. We bought about 20 acres outside of Dallas and started a cattle operation, and it was an old dairy farm, and there were goats and there were chickens, and there's this beautiful creek in the back and trees, and we had to clear a lot of the land, and I was using other creative muscles to do that, but I was in nature all the time. And a lot of what I saw out there for textiles, it was very literal. It was very much looked almost exactly like a cabbage rose, or, you know, and while I love gardening and roses and I talk about it a lot, I wanted something that was a little more abstract. And so I started drawing and creating, and I knew that I wanted a fabric and wallpaper line. I had dabbled for a while, but I wanted things that were different than what I was finding. And I made things custom for a while for some of our projects. And so I knew what went into it, and we designed a large number of patterns, and then we took it to Fabricut. And Vervain, they're one of the brands under the Fabricut family umbrella, was very interested in it, and then we built it out from there. So I was very excited to work with them. They were incredibly creative, and they got me. They understood me, and I think that that's when I knew that it felt right for me, and they were excited about it, and no one understands what their salespeople are wanting or craving than a particular brand. They know what sells and doesn't.
Right.
And
right.
so when they got excited about it, to me, that meant, oh, you're not so great. That's not what I was thinking. I was thinking, they think this will sell.
Yeah.
And that was exciting for me.
Yeah, because it came about for you. I'm saying this literally, no pun intended, like organically. It was
It was
from
very
nature.
organic.
It was so organic.
It was
That's gotta
very
be really
organic.
rewarding.
Yeah, it was really rewarding for me, and it's such a reflection of my family. So
Yeah.
it all
Yeah.
it had
Meaningful.
a story to tell.
Yeah.
Yes, very
Meaningful,
much.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, we've talked a bit about the role that the pandemic has made and played in the creative space. And I'm sure everybody here can identify with that in all of our different ways, right? That it kind of played out for us. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess that gives us a bit of idea of timeline. Let's talk a little bit about the timeline when you're launching your collection from the time of the design conception to the time that it's actually hitting the market. And so I guess Noz, with you coming fresh off of High Point, we're talking 2022 right now.
Spring 2022 was when they came back and approached. So
Okay.
2 years.
So it's
Yeah.
2 years. Okay. How does that track with you?
Tracks
Yeah.
almost exactly what,
Definitely.
18 to 24 months.
Yeah. Denise, you had a great point about, if things are stirring for a while behind the scenes and things are changing out there, there's new collections being launched all the time. How do you approach that? Because I think I'll let you say it better, is that other things that are kind of competing can come out while you're developing this.
Absolutely. And I think when you're designing, you can't design in a vacuum, although I like to design in a vacuum. I don't want to be influenced by something I've seen on Instagram. So when I'm in that mode, which can be months at a time, I try to shut out anything else for fear that it might influence me in a way that I wouldn't have organically created this thing. And inevitably, you design 40 pieces, 30 pieces, whatever. You get ready to pitch them, and someone does this great PR launch, and you're like, oh my God, that's my table. We're not presenting that. Someone
That's gotta
else
be
has
heartbreaking.
that. But you can't fall in love. You have to be so, you can't fall in love with them. I mean, they are a thing that needs to sell, and it
Yeah.
needs to be an original thought in my mind.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what are we doing?
Why do it,
What are we
right?
doing? So yeah, that happens. I mean, it happens a lot, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you told me that, I just thought, it would just be crushed. You spent all this
Well, if you
time.
had
Yeah.
3, maybe, but with
Yeah.
30,
Yeah.
you feel a little better,
You're like, I'm good.
right?
Well, and a lot of times you do design, I just presented to Hickory Chair some new SKUs this week. They wanted a lounge chair. Well, I presented 4 lounge chairs because I rely on our partners to say, okay, well, we know the marketplace and we know what our customer is going to be looking for.
Yeah.
So you want to give them that range that allows them to
Yeah,
specify
some room.
because of those
Yeah.
changes.
And if
That makes
something
sense.
doesn't sell, neither of us, the brand nor we're not
Kill it.
successful. I mean, I don't want something for vanity's sake.
Yeah.
Let's make some money,
Yeah.
right?
I like it.
mean,
Well, relationships. Let's talk about this. And Ray, I'm going to come to you first on this. How is this such a critical piece of what are you looking for in a relationship with a brand that kind of leads the way to success or doesn't?
I can't say that I'm going to look for it in this way, but I've had the good fortune of the universe to set me on certain paths. And with all 3, from arterials to visual comfort to Hickory Chair, I always say I feel like I fell into family because there's a simpatico, there's a common language that all of those businesses offer. And I had the good luck to find that spot and to have the guidance from my product licensing partner to land me in those places. And so for me, it wasn't something I was looking for, but as soon as I fell into it, I knew that it was meant to be.
Because is there a very open, creative conversation? Or maybe it's not creative. I don't know if that's the right word.
Certainly,
I don't know, but
so I go to Hickory Chair and I present all of this furniture you know, this is a North Carolina furniture maker. We're going to be building things out of wood. And I go in and I've got this whole series that I call the Cradle series, which have steel frames and little antique brass feet. And, you know, and I presented all these things, hickory chair, and they kind of looked at me for a minute, sideways, and then they looked back and they said, okay, well, this is different, but we can figure it out. And so I think finding the businesses that, and the manufacturers that have that capacity and that hunger to learn something different.
Yeah.
And, you know, so they set off with all this steel and metal, and, you know, you're always dancing between, do we import it or do we make it more locally? They went up the road to Boone, North Carolina, to Charleston Forge, which y'all might know a lot about, and they're doing the majority of the steel for my product, which, you know, the fact that it's able to be done here, and there are price points that, you know, some of the things they have to import, but that they really had the insight to seek somebody locally.
Yeah, they're like, seems like they're open to innovation and kind of expanding their range, right?
Yes. I think, you know, I hit at the right time. They were looking for, they had a certain look, and, you know, we all know Suzanne Kassler's wildly successful collection there. And Suzanne, I like to say, well, we play really well together, you know, because I think I brought a different point of view that had a little more of that architectural language, maybe a little more masculine, although I've been designing a lot more feminine things because it needs it. We all need it. And so anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Denise, how about for you when it comes to finding that right fit when you're, like you're saying, kind of like maybe shopping it and, you know, what are the markers of a good relationship for you?
Believe it or not, I really look for family businesses. I like when there is a family history behind a business. That's how I started my business. I know what it's like to operate in really lean times. I know what it's like to take a big leap or a risk. And so I think we have a lot in common from a business perspective.
Yeah.
And a lot of the brands, almost all of the brands that I work with are family-owned businesses started by the father or the grandfather. And, you know, there are multiple family members now working in the company. And I found success with that. I feel like I understand them and they understand me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of great to search for that. I'm also looking for partners that have a desire to expand what they've always had. Like they have a hunger for something unique or different. I don't want them so shut down to say, oh, that's not us. Like if Hickory were to have said to you,
right,
that steel frame is just not what we do. I'm looking for people that are open to listening to the ideas that I have. And when you come to the table with things that are maybe a little different than what they've always done, and they're excited about that, that's who you want.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Naz, you would agree?
Oh, for sure. And it's funny, I don't even know why a brand would want to do a collaboration if they weren't excited to get outside of their own comfort zone and their own language, right?
Like it was pitched to some that are.
Oh, well, that's a bummer. And I'm so thrilled that the folks that you are working with
that's great.
are the ones who get it.
Absolutely.
You know? Because yeah, I definitely, as a person who was not educated in industrial design or electrical engineering and had never endeavored to do a lighting collection, but was very excited about using heavy jewelry as inspiration, evidently presented initial ideas where the engineers came back and also their in-house designer with HVLG. And they were like, listen, these are great. They're going to cost $1 million to produce a unit. Additionally, we don't even have the tooling for most of these ideas. But we could maybe in the future, but right now, these ideas are crazy. Also, they're just not going to be like makeable in the 2-year time frame. And I was like, that makes sense. And they're like, but we love the ideas, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to come back to you with a revision where we're going to propose ways of utilizing these ideas with what we know, which is manufacturing. And we know our plants, we know our factories, we know our suppliers. We're going to come back to you with ideas that take some of these ideas, like some, and frankly, some of the final ideas are just my ideas, period, which is really cool. Yeah. Those are the ones where I nailed it. Many of the other ideas were left on the drawing board, but it was the willingness to hear and understand what were the ideas I was putting out there, what were the details that I was really excited about. And then even after the revision round came in, I was like, well, I still want to push. Like, I still want to do more things, like the Mariner chain, which features throughout a lot. It's like an oversized chain that has an irregular extra link. Like that was something that I really pushed for because I love chains and I love chandelier chains, and I'd never seen someone do a chain with that particular link before. That was something that derived completely from jewelry and absolutely 1,000,000% slows the line down. Like most chain machines, they basically do a link and then there's the next link and then the next link, and that also is what makes the chains adjustable in terms of length so that you can receive 8 feet of chain, and if your client only needs 3, then you get to keep 5 feet of chain. What I had proposed doing is not manufacturable and also not editable that way. So there was a lot that I learned through the process, but it was their willingness to slow the line down in order to accommodate that link that allowed us to really have a true collaboration that I was so excited about. And as it turns out, everyone likes this link. We ended up using it as like swag at our High Point event.
Oh, wow.
Like we made little jewelry pendants out of this like giant link. And people asked to buy them, and also someone asked if it was Christian Dior, and I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. No, ma'am, it is not. It's actually a piece of chain that came off of a lamp. So it was really cool that this brand was willing to work with me, right? And they didn't have to. They really could have been like, listen, we're the big guys, and we're the ones, I mean, like, because let's say it, right? Like, I have put not a single dollar into having to personally invest any kind of financial risk in any of this, right? The brand is the one who's responsible for all of the shipping and all of the damages that come from that. Before that, all of the cost to R&D and ensure that all of this is manufacturable and then usable. They take on the liability of the UL listing to make sure that the lights are safe in certain damp conditions. Like, I don't have to take on any of that exposure. All I have to do is not get paid until anything sells to come up with ideas and market the collection. So there's a huge privilege for I think most of us where that's the business model, to not have to be financially liable for these things, which means that the brands are the boss. Like if it doesn't work for them, then it's fine with me, you know? So it was really cool that the brand was excited about pushing themselves and pushing their own manufacturing, and in fact even surrendering some profitability from a P&L standpoint, particularly with the chain, in order to make these ideas come to life, because they were like, this is gonna be good for business.
Yeah. And it's smart for them to do that, because from the magazine side, we're always looking for new stories. And so if no one's innovating, if they're not kind of stretching that, and that's why these designer-led lines are so important, because it's pushing the stories forward, you know? It's doing something new, it's innovating. And then that's something, you know, jewelry, that's something we can like get into and say, oh my gosh, this is something new that people don't know about. And so when you say like, they slowed their line down a little bit, it's like that, there's a story that will come out of that. Not necessarily the line, we don't have to go into that, but you know, it enabled that collection. So that's really exciting to us. So, but you talk about investment of money. Let's talk about investment of time, because this was a big discussion, right?
Surprise.
Surprise. Denise, do you want to start here?
Sure.
Weekly phone calls and...
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, if you're developing a pitch, there's so much time that goes into, you can sketch it, but then we go ahead and do CAD drawings, or at least a rendering, so that you can put together a fully realized vision to whoever you're pitching to, and multiple SKUs, and it has to look professional, and you're working things out and you're tweaking things, and there's a call, and then a week later you look at the revisions, and there's a lot of work that goes into it before we even pitch it. Then there's the work once it's accepted that you're going to do to look at prototypes. You're going to look at size and scale, and maybe you drew it that way, but once you see it in person, you fly out to look at the chandelier that you've designed, something feels off, or the metal's not as thick as you had hoped it would be. And then there's finished samples that come from, especially if you're working overseas factories. I mean, how many versions of antique brass exist? I will tell you, like 60,000. There's so many different interpretations of that finish. So you're either developing your own finished sample, or you're asking for 6 from them and you're choosing. There's a lot of work that goes into getting that piece right before the sample is hung in the showroom for everyone to see at High Point Market. And that it takes in a tremendous amount of time. With fabric and wallpaper, you're looking at repeats, you're looking at size and scale, or you're like, God, on a 54-inch wide piece of fabric, there's way too many blackberries going across there. We need to blow that scale up a bit. You can design it from a pattern perspective, but once you really look at it and in a large sample, and those things are being shipped back and forth, or you're flying out to do a product review, and there's 6 or 8 people in the room, and it is kind of designed by committee. So there's a lot of politics that goes into that as well.
Yeah, and there's a bit of adjusting your firm's workload, right?
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Ray, is that kind of how you've...
Yeah, I guess as a novice going into it, I thought you were just going to present some drawings, then you'll do scale drawings to them, and you'll send them off and you'll review.
Yeah.
But there are so many more layers to it. It certainly is the prototype review, and that's such a critical stage because with Hickory Chair, they redefined how I perceive comfortable upholstery. I used to buy a lot of Italian upholstery, and I still love that. Some of my lines try to echo some of their posture, but they would literally sit you in a chair, and they would have these little shims, and they would set you back like not even half an inch, like quarter of an inch,
And you can feel
and you
it.
get the rake exactly right, and the fill, and the 8-way hand-tied springs, and the down wrap, all of those things that go into it. And there is just a lot more than just drawing something and coming up with this idea.
Yeah.
And then, once you've got it all settled, well, you got to name it. You got to write your product description.
That is the hardest part. That is the hardest part for me. And they don't want just a tiny product description. It has to tell a story under that one piece.
Yeah.
And 30 product descriptions and names. I mean, every cow in my herd has a name on my lighting collection. I mean, I was like, what am I going to name that light? It's the amber. It's the whatever,
Bestie.
It's so hard. There is no Bessie. Yeah. Oh. Yes. But yeah, that takes a lot of creative juice as well.
Yeah.
We have a baby book with names
No, we
in
did.
it
No, that's
that we have
Lindsay,
used.
my design manager. It's baby names. Absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds like us going
I mean,
through headlines.
after a while, you can only invent so much.
I mean, it's
Right.
true.
Right.
Well, that was the main jank point for me. Was I came up with all kinds of great names. Personally, that was my favorite part because I use mostly like names of ear piercings or names of the actual jewelry that it was named after or the way that you
like
set
a
the
reference
stone.
point, sure.
Yeah, so that was easy for this particular collection until they came back and like, well, unfortunately, as suspected, there's already a bunch of lights that have these names. So I couldn't use helix, I couldn't use rook. And then I had snug in there, which is a type of ear piercing. And they were like, so brand came back and unfortunately that name is too cute. And we need to have more elegant names for Corbett. And I was like, ugh, would snug have worked for Mitzi? And they were like, yes. Yes, it probably would have. So I had to redo a bunch of them, which was wild. But for me, the thing that was really, I guess I should have expected it, but I wasn't prepared necessarily, is the amount of time invested into not just the sort of development of the package, kind of the customer-facing package, like the names and the descriptions and all of that, but all of the other production that we managed to do our own in situ sort of like, contextual environmental photo shoots and the video shoots and all of the marketing assets and the promotion and the being certain places at the launches and speaking. That piece I feel is the other side of having good product that is useful is people understanding why it exists in the marketplace.
You need to be telling the story,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and they look to you to, what is the environment you want to put this
Right.
in? And so you've got to find a place to photograph it. For me, I used my house in Nashville. But then there's also going to market, twice a year.
Yeah.
We set up and reinvent a showroom. It's new fabric to frame every single damn market.
Right.
And, in finishes, we were talking about finishes
Right.
early, you got to push yourself to really explore different finishes so that you're showing your product in new and different ways.
If
so
you
that
want to
people
sell it
can-
across the country.
If you want
Right.
to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that went into that I wasn't prepared for,
And we have images on the slideshow from Vervain where they call, I didn't expect this. I got a phone call and they're like, so we need to shoot all of your product And here's the 2 spaces that we have in the studio. We need you to design rooms
Yeah.
with all of your fabric and wallpaper only. So as designers, we mix in product from other brands, right?
Right.
So now I'm taking my collection, using it exclusively on fabric frames, wallpaper, window treatments, everything else, and creating 2 completely different looks for them. That told the story. And it was produced in a month, and then I went out while they shot it and styled it, and that's what they used for the marketing materials. There's one up right now. And so everything in that photo is our fabrics and wallpaper. And you really are stretched beyond what your daily job is when you design a product collection, because Ray has to use every single piece in his collection in that room with only the fabrics that are available in the line, with only the finishes that are available in the line, and make it look unique, fresh, and original. And that, I'll be honest with you, that's a little bit of a stretch for me. It took me a bit, because I'm known for really mixing very different periods and styles together to create this look. And so it was a tad of a stretch. And
You almost have to unlearn things.
you
in a
really
way.
do.
Yeah.
And it helped me understand my collection better, though, and show people how you can use a lot of it in a space, which, hey, win for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But it was new for me.
Yeah. Katie, we're out of time. A couple questions? Yeah, I have. Can we do a real quick last question for each of you, briefly? How do you define success for a product line? Like, what is a successful?
How do you define
How
it?
would you define? Like you've put this out there. It's out there. When do you say this was good?
The easy answer is it sells. But, going to market and having people come up to you and say, oh my God, I love this so much. And let me show you a picture of how I've used it.
How you
And-
use it,
And then,
yeah.
to see what your idea was for this product, but reinvented through a designer's eyes, to me is thrilling. And sure sign of success for.
And for me, the same. Designers will reach out on Instagram and say, our rep brought us all your fabrics today. We ordered a ton of memos. We're really excited about the collection. It's really beautiful. You should be proud. Like things like that from your peers mean a lot to me.
Yeah, same, for sure.
Same.
And in my case, it's just humbly, I want to be useful to people. I want my ideas and the effort that we put forward to be of service. And so if what happens with this collection is that it lands with people and they're like, this is what I want to show my client, or this is what I was looking for, then somehow all of this effort has actually become relevant to somebody else besides me, which is really cool.
Yeah, it sounds influential in design today, and hopefully tomorrow, and going forward. So, okay, I've learned a lot. We're going to open up to a few questions right here. Katie's got a microphone, so if you wouldn't mind holding for a moment.
Good afternoon. This question addresses the legal side of licensing. Did you have your own IP firm representing you? Can you address the negotiations and how that went, and what would you recommend?
Yeah. So I hired an IP attorney specifically for the review of the contract that was being sent over. The process takes a while. Probably of the 2 years, the first 4 months were back and forth about the contract. The things that I would recommend are making sure ownership of the ideas is time-bound somehow. So generally speaking, according to my IP attorney, because he was like, this contract looks pretty standard, they will try to own every idea, even the ones that don't become product, into perpetuity. But that's highly negotiable. So that for me is kind of the one main takeaway. And then everything else is probably unique depending on how long they plan to hang on to the product ideas and how long they plan to manufacture it or whatever. But that piece of it, being able to have my ideas back in ownership once they end production on certain things, or after a certain time period after which the dead ideas can come back to me and I can reuse those again, that was the most important thing that I needed to make clear.
And mine really focuses on marketing the product. I've had relationships very early on where there wasn't a huge amount of focus on marketing the collection. And not a lot of people knew about it, and it's not going to sell if it's not out there. So for me, I want to make sure that they're doing national advertising, that our name is on that product. Sometimes you'll see product out there and the licensing designer, they're not named or listed anywhere. So this is an exercise in building your brand. And it's really important that your name is attached to that marketing and that there's a certain amount of focus. So that was important for me.
Yeah, no, Ray.
I would just echo everything that y'all have said. Absolutely. You know, having gone from the Arteriors license to Visual Comfort, those things that aren't selling, to your point, to have them come back to you and be able to either reinvent them or have them produced by someone else is key.
Yeah, and just keeping all of your creative work
Yeah,
in your own control.
is your own.
I think,
Yeah.
right?
Thank you very much. I'm a patented inventor, and I never thought of licensing any of my inventions, which is why they're not on the market, because I get stuck in I have to do it myself. And one of you discussed having a product licensing agent you worked with. Was that specific to the home furnishings industry, or were they a product licensing agent at, just general?
So I think that was me. Lori Salmore, she had originally worked with Barbara Berry and kind of rolled out Barbara's first product launches. And so she knew the business inside and out for a long, long time. And she really specializes. I mean, she's at every market with us. I mean, she represents several designers that are licensing. So having that knowledge and those sense of relationships have been critical. I could never get anywhere if I were doing it on my own. So I really am thankful for
So
those
much
champions.
behind the scenes that we just don't know about. There's just
Yeah.
It's
so
a
much behind the
completely
scenes.
it's a whole other business.
Yeah.
Very
It really
different.
is.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay. And I think this needs to be the last, and then
Okay.
we'll take our conversation upstairs to
Let's go to
Fabric.
Fabricut after this question. All right.
Were your relationships born out of an existing relationship that you had with the vendor because you were ordering a lot of hickory chair, or was it organic that they saw something that you were doing and approached you in that manner?
It was more organic. I was certainly buying from Hickory Chair and Arteriors, but it grew more once that relationship was established. So we had a little in, but it took off from there.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because obviously, a lot of people would be buying from them, so they kind of like look at you and say, I think there's some, yeah, I could see that.
And there are a lot of companies, I think, that they do really look for who are designers that are purchasing from us.
Yeah.
They want to be an extension for you in that regard.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. There was just such harmony in this panel, and we learned so much. There was just kind of probably a lot of note-taking out there because there was a lot of information and so much goes into that. And so I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank Fabricut again. I hope you all come up with us to the showroom, and most of all, I want to thank the three of you for being here and lending your insight to what I know has been some hard-earned knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.